There is a cliche in the English language of the joke gone too far. As a funny guy myself and a lover of things that happened, I wondered, what is the farthest a joke has gone in history? Well, in living memory, my mind goes to the Laugh Factory in Los Angeles, 2006, when Michael Richards, best known for his role as Cosmo Kramer on the iconic sitcom Seinfeld, targeted a heckler in the crowd with the most potent racial slurs. That was too far, very far, but nobody died at the Laugh Factory that night. The same cannot be said of another joke cracked in 1545 by one of the era's most notorious pranksters, Charles de Valois. Yes, the House of Valois, the ruling family of the Kingdom of France at the time. Charles was the son of Queen Claude, who herself died at the age of 24 after birthing 7 children, respect, and the French King Francis I, or Francois Premier. You might see little c referred sometimes to as Charles II, Duke of Orleans, to distinguish himself from other Charleses in the family. Now, for that juicy context, 1545. Now, I love 16th century Europe. I don't know if there's a more underrated era in so-called Western history than the 1500s. This was when the Middle Ages transformed into what's now called the early modern era. So many major developments happened covering the whole scope of humanity. I'm talking Renaissance, the Reformation, great art, great characters, and the first era of European-led globalization. In the midst of all this was one of the most impactful individuals, at least in French history, yes, right, King Francois. Source reveal. Who am I relying on here beyond Wikipedia? Desmond Seward and his 1973 book, Prince of the Renaissance, The Golden Life of Francois I. I know that Seward is a popular historian, so all you academics can stuff it. Because this book is on the Internet Archive, and the source of this quote by Francis that I think embodies himself as well as his ideal. A true Frenchman ought to be quick, active, lively, and always alert. Francois was crowned in 1515, ruling for 32 years until 1547. His nickname was Francois du Grand Nez, which is accurate given the size of his nose, but he should also be known as Francois du Grand Couille because he was a man of the Renaissance. He collected literature. He strived to standardize the French language at a time when regional linguistic disparity between, say, the north of France and the south of France was something to get across. And he declared Francais the national language. Francis dropped bags of gold on palatial chateaux, both renovated and entirely new, like the famous Chateau de Chambord. And he wasn't just a patron of the arts, no, big flex. He owned the Mona Lisa. How? He convinced Leonardo da Vinci to move from Italy to Paris. And here's a painting of Francis lovingly holding a 67-year-old Leonardo on his deathbed. And that's why the Mona Lisa's at the Louvre today. Francois, the king, was everything a cool guy of the time would be. He did jousting, archery, falconry, horse riding, and apparently wrestling, as well as contemporary tennis. And in the eyes of today, Francois had a great reputation as a ruler. The Kingdom of France was powerful and cohesive, the single largest kingdom in all of Europe. And I want to underscore cohesive because relative to, say, its largest geographic competitor, the Holy Roman Empire. But let's not laugh yet. Please no. This is the feudal era, and nobody embodied the transnational nature of personal dynastic power than Charles V, the ruler of one of the largest collective empires of all time. Charles was the head of the House of Habsburg, and as such, he was Archduke of Austria, and extended his rule to a collection of Central European territories inside and outside of the Holy Roman Empire, like Bohemia. But as Holy Roman Emperor, Charles couldn't exercise full authority in all parts of the empire because the HRE was basically a confederation of margraviates and grand duchies and prince bishoprics, and it was kind of a mess. It was notoriously kind of a gong show. However, Charles's father, Philip the Handsome, married a Castilian princess, Joanna the Mad, and so Charles ended up ruling the Netherlands, which is notable considering how wealthy and economically advanced the Low Countries were at the time. And he inherited the Kingdom of Spain, a relatively new entity, which included the Crown of Aragon's lands in southern Italy, and a then unmatched collection of colonial holdings in the Americas and beyond. We'll take one look at a map of Europe at the time, and you see that France was surrounded on multiple sides by its strongest competitor, the Habsburg Empire. So no surprise, the two sides fought a number of wars, namely a series of 9 wars over a 65-year period from 1494 to 1559. These wars were mostly by proxy, using the divided yet very rich political landscape of the Italian peninsula as a battleground. And so these are called the Italian Wars, which, like the 16th century as a whole, get grossly overlooked today. Of course, when you talk about the Renaissance, you think of the cultural and scientific aspects of the Renaissance first. But the movement, which ended up covering pretty much all of Europe, started and thrived in Italy. So all those great designs and pieces are underscored by a constant conflict brought on by the rivalry of two foreign powers, kind of like a 16th century Cold War. Yeah, this was the era of Michelangelo, but also Machiavelli, and that's for a reason. It is in the context of the Italian Wars that Prince Charles re-enters the stage, ready to take a joke too far. How did he do it? Why did nobody stop him? Maybe because they were accustomed to young Charles being a fool. Prince Charles left us a historical record. Again, shout out to Seward. He was considered attractive. You couldn't even notice the fact he was blind in one eye because of smallpox. Like many princes raised in luxury, he was noted for his frivolity and extravagance. But Charles was also known for clowning around, pulling pranks, and just having a good time. The court loved him, much more than the heir to the throne, the Dauphin, Prince Henri, or Henry, and so did his father. Francis shared the same fun-loving personality as Charles. But you may ask, what was funny to people in the 1500s? Well, I don't really know, but if there's one thing I've learned from studying history, it's that humans have not changed, and that humor you can include. Early modern humor could be as vulgar and juvenile and stupid as what we consider lowbrow today. So as a teenager or as a young adult prince, I hope that Charles pulled a chair out from somebody trying to sit down or threw a pie in the face of a noble or other courtier. One of his jokes, though, resulted in death. September 6, 1545. Charles and Henry, the two princes, are on their way to Boulogne-sur-Mer, a port fortress in northern France, to help relieve a siege of the city. They're called the Italian Wars, but they didn't only take place in Italy. Anyway, they're on their way to Boulogne, and on the way they had to stop and rest. Being royalty in wartime, that meant they could just walk into any house they wanted and crash for the night. Well, the group of houses they came to was marked as infected with the plague. Now, contemporary medicine was not perfect, and you often come across just sort of any disease get called the plague in this time period, even though it may not be the bubonic plague per se, but considering just how devastating the plague was in years past, and it was recurring time and time again after the infamous Black Death wave of the 14th century. Yeah, anyway, Seward says it was probably influenza. And I mean, how relevant is that? And Charles, in one of the most arrogant statements to ever backfire, allegedly said, "No son of a king of France ever died of the plague." So he and his brother entered some of the houses where Charles caught the giggles and proceeded to ransack this random person's home. He slashed up the bedding, where I assume they were planning to sleep, and started a pillow fight, causing down feathers to fly all over the place. That evening, while having dinner with the king and Henri, Charles got super sick, started vomiting, shaking, got the fever, and after 3 days, Charles died. He was 23 years old. So yeah, a couple of cheap ha-has taken at the expense of a stranger's bedroom, and you die after days of insufferable disease. Tough lesson. But wait, this was 500 years ago. History has a lot of these anecdotes coming from times of much less information recording than today, so it's right to be skeptical of some of the stories you may read. Charles was the popular son, who was slated to marry, get this, either the daughter or the niece of Charles V. Yeah, this is how European royals solve their problems. You're at war, how about we just marry our families and call it a day? And this arrangement, which also included some exchanging of territories, angered Henry the Dauphin, the heir to the throne. The way you could look at it was, okay, when Francis dies, Henry might be the king, but Charles is married to the Habsburg emperor, and he's got all these other territories in his name, namely in northern Italy, around Milan, a very rich city even then, which was the cause of a lot of this fighting. So there's a theory, considering the fact that Henry is there, and with the case of the illness and how Charles died, that Henry had Charles poisoned. The old Prince Joffrey for all you Game of Thronesers. Well, an assassination between dynastic rivals, even blood relatives, would not be unique in history, and given the circumstances of the death, it is totally plausible. However, with the story of the plague-ridden house, that's also possible too. So we don't really know, but whatever happened, just 2 years after little Charles died, potentially because of doing something he thought was funny, King Francois also died, 1547, and the crown of France was laid on the head of Henry II. Long story short, he did not do a good job as a king. He mishandled the growing religious rift in France between Catholics and the Protestant Huguenots. And when Henry himself died in a bizarre jousting accident, France spiraled into a brutal sectarian civil war for the last 36 years of the 16th century, in which millions of people died. I want to talk about how Henry died and the consequences, but let's save that for maybe another video. For now, thank you for watching and listening.